And that gave me the impression, this is what I'm looking for. He's changed. And I had invited him to a party that I was going to go to. And he said, no, I don't party, I don't drink, I don't dance, I'm a Muslim. And that stuck with me right there. I said, he's found something. And I just stopped there. I mean, I was just reading the Quran in English, actually. But the verse means, if you are in doubt about what we have sent to our servant, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then bring one surah, one chapter that is like it. Just bring one. Like if you don't believe that this is from God, then surely you can create something just like it. But the Arabic is really interesting. It says, but you have never done it and you will never do it. I do have that profound sense of peace, like fulfillment and, I guess just like safety almost. Like I feel secure, you know. I don't feel lost anymore.
The following is a conversation with Daniel Oliver from Texas, who shares his journey of converting to Islam. His interest in the faith was first sparked by a movie about Malcolm X, and later, during university, he began learning about Islam in depth. What stood out to him was the absence of images of deities in Islam, which left a strong impression. While he saw other religions as fantastical, Islam felt different, logical, and true. In this interview, Daniel reflects on his path to Islam, the insights that led him to accept it, and how it has shaped his life. Join us as we explore his inspiring story and reflections on faith.
Okay, well, I'm from Austin, Texas, and of course, that's in the United States. Um, it's, of course, predominantly Christian, so that was my actual upbringing as well. And what's interesting about Austin, though, is that it's kind of a liberal oasis in the rest of Texas. So while religion does form an important part of the climate there, I mean, you can see churches everywhere. There's also a kind of sensibility that's very strong towards kind of, well, for example, we had a campaign when I was growing up called Keep Austin Weird, which was basically this idea of staying, unique and eclectic and stuff like that. So I'm just mentioning that because I think it has a lot to do with affecting me and my upbringing as much as the religious atmosphere.
What was your religious or spiritual background when you started learning about Islam?
Well, I mean, we grew up in a kind of church environment where there's different denominations. My particular denomination was one where it's like a very dynamic church service, a lot of singing, a lot of dancing. I think one thing that did affect me later is the fact that this particular church was led by someone who had, I think, a PhD in theology. So there was this idea of reading the texts in their original language and even presenting that during the church services. But my first encounter with Islam was, I mean, I was kind of wild when I was a kid. So when I was a teenager, my parents introduced me to someone, like another adult, who basically they were just like, just talk to him because we don't know what to do with him. And he was kind of more on the Nation of Islam side of things. But I would say that was the first time someone actually said, there is this thing called Islam, there is this thing called the Quran. And that gave me the impression that Islam is a religion of upliftment as well as discipline. I also got exposed to a very popular film called Malcolm X, which was, I think, an excellent film, mashallah. I mean, I think Muslims should watch that. But it's about 3 hours long, directed by Spike Lee. It has one of my favorite actors starring in the film. And that didn't put me on the path towards being interested in Islam. But I think it's one of those things that just kind of left a deposit in my mind that would sort of come to fruition later. So by the time I got to really the end of high school and starting to get ready for university, um, I felt that university was a chance to explore, intellectually, philosophically, and spiritually. I didn't think of it as a way to, get a job, get a good degree so I could get a job. I mean, I had a lot of interests. I wanted to study just a random set of classes, not any particular specialization. So I was studying stuff like Intro to Asian Art, religions of East Asia, this are religions of Asia, I remember. And in that particular course, which by the way was taught by a convert to Islam, and this was at Duke University. Um, well, most of the major world religions have come from Asia, and we kind of went through all of them, including Islam. And when you juxtapose Islam, let's say aesthetically versus other religions, it doesn't compare favorably because you've got all this, really kind of fantastical imagery coming out of Hinduism, for example, gods with elephant heads. And I wasn't looking to convert to a religion. I was really just wondering, like, what is all this stuff? Like, there's so much stuff in the world. So, like, I want to know a little bit more about it. And when you get to Islam, it's very, it's bare in the aesthetic sense. You don't have imagery. I mean, there is the Arabic calligraphy, but if you're studying Islam in a class that's just going to cover it for one unit, you really don't look at a lot of pictures besides a picture of Mecca, maybe a picture of a mosque, maybe a picture of someone praying. So, which does in fact distinguish Islam in a way, because there is something more austere and less fantastical about it. But once again, I wasn't exactly looking to choose a new religion. I was just curious about everything in the world, including religions and cultures and the art. But I think later, I finally started to have this idea that, I'd always believed in God, but I had stopped believing in the church in the sense that when I would be at church, I didn't feel that I believed in what was going on. Like I didn't feel any conviction. I was attending because my parents were attending. It wasn't something where I myself adopted the principles and the various teachings. It was just kind of, I was there. But I never disbelieved in God. So I wasn't an atheist. I was just someone who didn't respond to that particular religion. But I always believed that there was a creator. It wasn't something that I really did anything about because I didn't know anything about it. It was just kind of, if you had asked me if I were an atheist, I would have said no, basically. But later on, I kind of felt, these various intellectual and philosophical explorations brought me to think there, if there's a God, he must have communicated to mankind. And I want that directly. Like I want to access that communication directly. So I had developed this idea that I would start studying, ancient languages at some point to try to find a scripture which was definitely from God, unchanged, which is exactly what the Quran is. But I wasn't really aware of Islam. Like I said, it had come up in a couple of classes, but it wasn't on my mind. But I would say that was the point at which my journey towards Islam began, because I was looking for the truth specifically about God and a revelation from him. And I think on a personal level, I was looking for a higher way of living. I think somehow I had the humility to feel that I can't just guide myself. How would I know the right way? I'm figuring it out. Like the right way must be known and I can follow it, because kind of doing things my own way just kind of took me in these big circles where I felt that I had changed. I felt that I had grown, but I was still the same person. So I started to get hungrier and hungrier for a truth that I could attach myself to.
What did you think about Muslims and Islam before you started learning about it?
I had transferred to Columbia University after my first year at Duke. So I happened to be in Manhattan on September 11th. However, I refused to see Muslims as terrorists or really as being all of them being any one thing. That just wasn't my way of thinking. And I was someone who was very well and widely read. So just buying into propaganda wasn't something that I would do. Um, so I remember one time I saw a person, he had a beard and he had a cap. I'm sure he must have been South Asian. But he was smoking a cigarette. And again, I mean, I didn't have a lot of knowledge about Islam, but I had an impression and I was like, he shouldn't be doing that. I mean, you see plenty of people smoking, but I felt like that guy's breaking his own rules. So I did have this impression that Islam is a life of, not in a negative way, but like discipline and strictness. Like it's not just you do whatever you want. You can believe one thing and do another thing. I don't know. Somehow I had that impression. But to be honest, maybe I mean, when you watch movies in America, you're going to see all these kind of, even before September 11th, just these stereotypes of Muslims just being like really angry. And, so I remember once when I was in high school, a friend of mine who I now realize was Muslim, although I didn't know it at the time, just by his name, I know that he was a Muslim. He had grown a beard in high school, which I can't even grow a beard now. But I remember I just said, "Oh, you look like a terrorist." And I realized, obviously, that probably bothered him, but I didn't mean anything by it. That doesn't mean it was the right thing to say. So, in other words, I think I did have some subconscious impressions, but honestly, there was no strong impression either way about Muslims. Where I grew up was really diverse. I spent time with a lot of different, socioeconomic classes, races, as well as, people who are immigrants or their parents have been immigrants. So I just wasn't the type of person to really cling to a stereotype, meaning everyone from this group is like that. That just wasn't my line of thinking, which I think probably helped because I didn't have to overcome that in order to accept Islam.
Right. What convinced you to accept Islam?
Two things, okay? The person who invited me to Islam was a fellow student at Columbia University. I had actually gone away for about 2 years. I was an exchange student overseas, and then I took some time off school. By the time I came back, he had become Muslim. We weren't close friends before, but most of my colleagues had graduated because I had taken time off school. So he was kind of one of the few people I knew. And I remember to this day, the first time I saw him, he was just, had a nice smile on his face. And I thought that's different. He wasn't like a smiley person before, like kind of a tense person and stuff like that. And that gave me the impression, this is what I'm looking for. He's changed. And I had invited him to a party that I was going to go to. And he said, no, I don't party, I don't drink, I don't dance, I'm a Muslim. And that stuck with me right there. I said, he's found something that can change you, like a profound change, not just, a change of habit, let's say. And that immediately attracted me to want to know more. The second thing is after we had started spending time because I wanted to learn more about Islam, he gave me a translation of Quran, like English only. And I read the verse in Surah Baqarah that I will just recite just briefly. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإن كنتم في ريب مما نزلنا على عبدنا فأتوا بسورة من مثله وادعوا شهداءكم من دون الله إن كنتم صادقين وإن لم تفعلوا ولن تفعلوا. And I just stopped there. I mean, I was just reading the Quran in English, actually. But the verse means, if you are in doubt, about what we have sent to our servant, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then bring one surah, one chapter that is like it. Just bring one. Like if you don't believe that this is from God, then surely you can create something just like it. But the Arabic is really interesting. It says, but you have never done it and you will never do it. And that stopped me, in my tracks, let's say, because only God could say that. That was the first thought in my head as I was reading. The minute I finished those words in English, I said, only God could say this. No one has ever done anything like what I have done, and no one will ever do that. Because you will see, whoever your sport hero is that you consider to be the greatest of all time or the greatest performance of all time. Even the person who has done it won't say, no one has ever been as good as me. No one has ever played this well, and no one ever will. So someone may set a record in any field, the richest person in history, the best athlete in history, the best athletic performance in history. But they won't say this will never be surpassed because you're setting yourself up for embarrassment. I mean, obviously, the minute you claim it's never been done, people will do research and find there was someone as good as you. Or the minute you say this will never be done, of course, someone's going to surpass it, even by just a little. So I realized just to think to say this is only something that God himself would say, Allah. And that convinced me right there, even though I hadn't read the rest of the Quran, that this was indeed a book that was from God. And it may seem subtle to some, but to me, it just was something that this is written from the perspective of God. It's not man's words that we are given to follow, So I think those were the two things really that, I didn't become a Muslim at that moment. Like I didn't take my Shahada at that moment, but those two circumstances made me sure of the truth of what I was studying.
Tell us about that moment when you took your Shahada and how did it feel like?
Um, yeah, the moment of Shahada itself wasn't like a sort of, the end of the movie type of moment. It was a bit anticlimactic. I was sitting with that same friend. We spent a lot of time together. And I remember we were watching a basketball game. It was a Friday night. And I just said, hey, I want to say those words. He was like, what? Because I didn't remember the word Shahada, but he was telling me when you want to become Muslim, you say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, etc. So I said, yeah, like I'm ready. Like I just felt like I had hesitated a little bit, not out of doubt of Islam, but I think a little bit of doubt of myself that this isn't something to play with. So don't do it or start doing it, or let's say you're going to do it and then you kind of flake out, which I think you can get tidbits of my story. I had been traveling a lot. I had switched schools. I had left school. I had come back. So I kind of didn't trust myself. But then I started thinking, no, this is the truth. This is what you've been looking for. You're not going to walk away from this, right? And so I came to that point where I was ready to declare my Shahada. So, he walked me through it. I think we prayed 2 raka'at and probably, I don't know, we might have watched a little more basketball after that. But I did become a Muslim. I started praying every single day, etc. But yeah, that was the moment. It was a Friday night in March of 2004.
MashaAllah, and I'm truly happy for you, brother. What was the biggest challenge you faced after becoming a Muslim?
Um, Wallahi, alhamdulillah, it was easy. Um, and I will explain one challenge, but the reason it was easy is first of all, I was a college student, so no one really cares what you're doing. You're in New York City, you're at a university. So it's not like, maybe some people are living at home in an environment which is hostile towards Islam, for example. So that wasn't the case with me. Um, I think just adjusting my schedule because I needed to pray. And it's like, imagine I was in class on Friday and I wasn't a Muslim. Then I go to class on Monday and I'm telling my teacher, I need to leave so I can pray. And it's like, what? I mean, imagine the teacher is like, what do you mean you need to pray? Like, what are you talking about? And I said, I'm a Muslim. And obviously I hadn't said that before. So it's kind of, what are you talking about? And what are they going to say? I mean, I think my impression at that time was when it's time to pray, you just pray like at that moment. Like I didn't understand there's kind of a window, like I could have prayed after class and stuff like that. But I really wanted to learn Arabic so that I could understand the Quran myself and study it and obviously access more teachings. Um, so that was a really strong desire. And, it's not a language that's easy to access in the United States. I have, alhamdulillah, managed to learn Arabic. I had someone teach me how to read the Quran. And from that, I think Arabic is such a simple language. Most words are based on three characters, and you kind of add different letters and sounds in a very, systematic way to change the word to a noun or a verb or plural, etc. So I'm alhamdulillah, like I've studied a lot of languages. I was just naturally picking up the way that words were changed and forming so I could kind of start to understand. Um, and I have spent many years in the Middle East, so I've learned Arabic as well from like exposure. Um, Now, as for my family, I was worried how they would react because you have left their religion. I think that in my church growing up, there was some, I won't say hostility to Islam. I think there was more of an anxiety about Islam taking followers because in the African American community, a lot of people are attracted to the Nation of Islam, which is, I guess, a particular group. And I think a lot of people kind of go to Orthodox Islam as well. So I remember it being mentioned in the church that, so and so is taking followers because of this. But so I didn't know how my family would react. And I wanted to tell them in person. So I had some anxiety because I just didn't know. The first time that I saw my family in person was at my brother's college graduation. So I took my Shahada in March of 2004. He graduated in May. And my whole family was, of course, going to gather uh, at that time. So I thought, this is when I will tell them. But I was even thinking, this is his moment. I don't want to ruin it. So I don't want to say anything until after the graduation ceremony when we're just going to be around for a couple of days. So if it goes over badly, it won't ruin the graduation. So we were sitting in the car with, my mom and dad were driving me somewhere and like from the hotel to this place, something like this. Excuse me. And I basically told them in the car, and my dad's response was, he said, like, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next week? Become Hindu? So, I mean, he didn't even take it that seriously because, as I said, I've been doing so many things, getting into so many interests that for them, it was just like, the fad of the week. So again, a kind of anticlimactic response, which was a relief to me. But of course, in time, they found out that it was something that I was dedicated to. And my parents have always been positive about it because I think they can see its effect on my life and its effect on my character and my treatment of them. Um, and perhaps the teachings themselves have an appeal, or at least a resonance that they can sort of feel comfortable with. I mean, I'm not doing something that they have literally no idea about, so they just have to feel suspicious. I think there's a lot about Islam that a devout Christian can find familiar.
How would you compare your life before and after becoming a Muslim?
Um, it's the literal word Islam. You submit to something, and through that you find peace. Like it's a pact. Once you agree to that pact, you find the peace that comes with it. And the, I don't know, like there was always a sort of discomfort that I felt, like an emotional, a mental, a spiritual, even a psychological discomfort that I always carried around with me. You know, I mean, I would feel bored like in an oppressive way, but I think it's bored like I'm not doing what I want in a more profound way. Like, yes, you kind of feel bored at the moment if you're not doing something fun. But I think it was more profound, like I'm not doing what I more deeply desire to do. Um, I had a lot of disappointment and anxiety because I wasn't becoming the person that I wanted to become. I wasn't able to find the deeper meaning behind anything. Like, you read the headlines, you read the news, you read a book, and you're like, there's a deeper truth to everything that I'm reading about, everything that we're talking about. But like, not only do I not find it, but we're not discussing it. So like, this is all a waste of time if we're not dealing with the truth. Once I found that truth and committed myself to it, like I've never felt those feelings again. Like that dissatisfaction, that anxiety, that feeling of being lost, um, that depression. I've it's gone. And it's been 20 years, and it's just because I found what I needed in my life. So, I mean, it's a bit cliche because people say Islam means peace, which actually it doesn't. The word Islam does not mean peace. But I do have that profound sense of peace, like fulfillment and, you know, I guess just like safety almost. Like I feel secure, you know. I don't feel lost anymore.
Why should people learn about Islam?
Okay. On one level, the answer to that question can be, you know, non-religious. People should learn about Islam because it is their history. The contributions of Islamic civilization span worldwide at this point. Some parts of the world may be more recent than others. But if you don't know about Islam well, if you don't know about Muslims and what enabled them to accomplish what they accomplished, you don't know your own history, the history of Europe, you know, uh, the history of Islam in Switzerland, let's say. I think a lot of people may be unaware of that. The interaction of Islam with the Vikings and even how, you know, many Vikings converted to Islam and their interactions with, the Emirates of Cordoba and how that even was one of the reasons why they started going Viking because of trade reasons and stuff like that. Um, the contributions of Islam to science, like why are so many stars named with Arabic names? It's because Muslim astronomers, right? How many technological inventions have, I mean, everything is built upon everything else. So at a certain point, Islam is in those levels and stacks that lead up to the technology we have today, even
Exactly.
if it's on a conceptual level. When you see throughout history an Islamic civilization flourishing, what are the unique Islamic principles and elements that allow that? And how have later civilizations or, surrounding contemporaneous civilizations been influenced by that so that even today, those civilizations still have you know, uh, some kind of Islamic influence resonating through them. And I think that, for example, I'm from Texas. There's a place called Matamoros. Matamoros means, Mata means kill, Moros means Moors. Kill the Moors. There's a beach. I mean, it's a commonly known place. It's not like a tiny village that no one's heard of, and I sort of, a few people discovered it. Matamoros is a place where Muslims were brought from Spain, and they were like tortured and they tried to make them confess. And even in Mexico, the Inquisition that happened in Spain also happened in Mexico, because people in Mexico under the Spanish Empire included uh, Morescos and Morenos, who are either Jews or Muslims who were pretending to be Christian for the sake of their safety, right? And so, the history of Islamic civilizations that we know about extends even into the Americas. Mansa Musa is known as the wealthiest ruler or wealthiest person in history. Real wealth, not Elon Musk's digital balance sheet. I mean, we're talking about actual gold, like, physical wealth that really exists. But he only became emperor after his uncle abdicated the throne. And his uncle's name was Abu Bakr. Mansa Abu Bakr had heard that there was a large landmass across the Atlantic. This is the Mali Empire. He was a Muslim ruler. So he sent ships, go find this place and come back and report to me.
I have heard that actually he sent thousands of ships.
Right.
Correct me if I'm
I
wrong
think
here.
initially there were like, I think 200.
Mm.
There's a channel, like it's kind of a current that leads, it will pull your ship even without the wind. Like it's like a river in the ocean itself. So that current started to pull the ships away towards America. And one ship managed to turn itself back and go to Mansa Abu Bakr and say, this is what happened. So then he took 1,000 ships, as you said, and he abdicated his throne to his nephew, and he went and he never came back. And artifacts in the Americas, I think perhaps in the Caribbean, have been found, which I think it's the composition of the metal alloy is specific to that empire. So it shows that they did indeed land in the Americas. Africans who were enslaved were brought throughout the Americas while practicing Islam. And there are so many anecdotes about how long they managed to continue to practice and stuff like that. So once again, if a person doesn't study Islam, they don't know their own history, no matter where they are in the world. They won't know their own history. And they won't know that Muslims share history with them. So, just one more point on that idea. It's strange to me that in Spain, Islam, even when you talk about, the Emirate of Cordoba, it's considered, this was a foreign religion. But where did Christianity come from? Almost the exact same place. I mean, the root of Christianity is in Palestine. So the root of Islam is not so far away in Mecca and Medina. So why do they consider that the Roman Catholic Church, Rome was an empire that conquered Spain? How is their influence in their religion less foreign than Islam when Islam conquered them? But this again is why people should learn. It's part of your history. It's part of your world. We are part of your community. On a spiritual level, a person should learn about Islam because if you don't believe in God, well, how would you counter the claims that there is one without seriously considering them? Likewise, a person who believes in God should counter the claims that there is no God by seriously considering them. And that discussion does take place in the Quran, by the way. If you do believe in God, then how will you know that you are on the right path? There is no religion besides Islam which even claims that its books have been untampered with. Christians don't claim this. No serious Christian historian claims this. claims to have the original untouched. I mean, most of the Bible is most of the New Testament is translated from Greek or Latin, but Jesus spoke Aramaic. So I always ask, where's the Aramaic original? It's fine to read a translation, but do you have the original? They won't say that they do. The followers of the Torah do not claim that it's unchanged and no priests or scribes have ever made any change or that nothing has been lost. Buddhism started in a place that is near Nepal, which is in the Himalayas. But the oldest Buddhist texts are from, and that was in Sanskrit. The oldest Buddhist texts are from Sri Lanka, which is an island south of India. And they are from 300 years after the Buddha's lifetime. So they can't say that we have his authentic and original teachings untampered with. I don't know how reliable they consider those documents, but that goes back to my point that no religion besides Islam is even claiming that they have an intact revelation from the God that they worship. I think that a person who approaches religion and approaches God with sincerity has to study the claims that Islam doesn't make a claim. The claims about Islam, which are made in the Quran, that this is from God, and it's an authentic message that has been untampered with, whereas others have been tampered with. So I think that that is the spiritual reason that people should learn about Islam.
How can born Muslims support converts better in their journey of learning and growth?
That's a brilliant question, and it has to be answered, because there are a lot of people who convert and go back, and I've known them. May Allah guide them. People who make sincere conversions and they go back, and one point would be this: born Muslims must differentiate their culture from their religion, because a lot of people, whatever you're born into, you may consider it all to be part of the same package. And this makes difficulty for a convert because they will be far from the cultural center atmosphere of the masjid. So a mosque can serve as a place of worship, but oftentimes in America, it serves as almost, a cultural club. So it's the clubhouse of this immigrant community. It's the cultural center of that immigrant community. And a convert may walk in and all of a sudden everyone's speaking another language, which is fine, but no one takes the time to welcome this person, sit with him in English. I mean, you can get ignored in the masjid because everyone feels like, hey, we're here, let's hang out, let's speak our language. And that's really alienating, especially to someone who may be, look, I can't even eat because since I became Muslim, my mother will only cook pork in every meal, right? And you are my brothers. We're a universal brotherhood, and sometimes they don't get treated like that. So, and likewise, they may look at them and say, without maybe not say it, but give off this impression that you don't fit in, right? Maybe you're a different race than us, you're a different culture than us, you don't dress like us, you don't have the etiquettes that we have. And a lot of these etiquettes they may be something that's part of Islam, but they're not the essential parts of Islam. For example, a given style of dress. If a person's covering their body and they don't have something taboo on their shirt or something, then I think there's no reason to look at them funny or criticize them. When you talk about the born Muslims that I'm most familiar with, that's the American immigrant Muslim community. They often, let's say, they imbibe the racial hierarchy that they find in the United States. And it was a popular expression that, when European immigrants were coming about 100 years ago, the first word they learn in English is the N word. And what that meant was the first thing you do is get indoctrinated into the racial hierarchy. You're an immigrant, you may not be the right type of Christian, you may not be from Western Europe, like, the majority of people already in America. So you don't want to be at the bottom with those people. You need to sort of at least remember that your job is to be a buffer to keep them down and to work yourself away from their position. They have the jobs that you need to take as an incoming, foreigner. So this competition is there. And I think that the racial hierarchy, the racism that exists in the United States, it's almost a relief when you're not the target. So it's very easy to say, hey, the more people that I join in putting down, pushing people down makes me feel like I'm pushing myself up. And that's not the case. So I think that you have to be sensitive as a Muslim receiving a convert to not mistreating them by sort of unintentionally, kind of going through the motions and doing a lot of things that aren't Islamic or that make them feel unwelcomed or that constantly kind of make them feel like they're being judged and evaluated. Because if I go to a community and I don't feel that I can be accepted then by that community, well, if I'm a convert, I'm not just going to leave that community, I'm also going to leave the faith. So I think that these kind of types of awareness have to be there, or in brief, let's say that Islam is not a culture. Islam basically regulates culture so that someone doesn't have to be your culture to be Islamic. And it could very well be that your culture is non-Islamic, or at least some elements of it are. So I think that awareness has to always be there.
Daniel, I want to thank you for being my guest, and it was truly a pleasure to have you here and to be able to share your story.
Okay, yeah, Jazakumullahu khairan for having me. Um, I almost feel like I want to interview you, but we'll save that for another time. But yeah, I'm really I appreciate you helping me share my story because I've always wanted to tell it, but I think when you're just sitting down and trying to write it yourself, you don't know what the best elements to bring out may be. And I feel like you really helped me with that. So I appreciate this stroll down memory lane that we just took.
Thank you for watching. If you or someone you know has a story of embracing Islam, we'd love to hear it. Your journey could inspire and uplift others. Feel free to reach out to share your story on this channel. Let's continue to celebrate the beauty of faith and the diversity of our experiences. Please share this video and don't forget to subscribe for more meaningful content. See you in the next one, inshallah.